Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started. This is our Tuesday, June 25th, Council Legislative Session. We're going to begin with an invocation by Pastor Ann Rhoda, Vice President of Mission Integration and Spiritual Care, Adventist Healthcare. Please rise if you're able.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and provide this invocation. Before I begin, I'd just like to actually do a blessing on each of you leaders in our community as you serve. Let us begin. Leadership is hard to define. May you be the ones to define it with justice and compassion. Leadership is like a handful of water. May you be the people to share it with those who thirst. Leadership is not about watching and correcting. May you remember it is about listening and connecting. Leadership is not about telling people what to do. May you seek what people want and need. Leadership is less about the love of power and more about the power of love. May you continue to undertake the role of a servant leader. Leadership is always asking the question, what do I need to learn? May your greatest success be the reward of personal transformation. Leadership is continuing to walk in the path you have been given. May you be confident in your call to lead. Sacred One, known by many names and beyond all names, we ask your blessings on the people who have been called to lead in our community. We ask your blessings on the discussions and decisions that will take place today. Grant to all the wisdom and courage to know and do what is right and good and true. May all be guided by the spirit of community, by the spirit of justice, and by the spirit of love. This we pray in the name of all that we hold sacred and holy, all that we hold good and right and true. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you for that beautiful invocation. We now will move to presentations, and the first one is a proclamation recognizing the 75th anniversary of the Montgomery County Historical Society by Councilmember Hans Riemer.
Thank you, Council President Nancy Navarro. I am really pleased today. I want to invite everyone who's here for this proclamation to come join us, and I will in a moment invite Matt Logan to share some remarks, or whoever you have designated to do that. This year is a significant year for the Historical Society. You're celebrating the 75th year of your progress and your work and your organization. I can imagine what the climate, what the environment, what the history was as you formed 75 years ago, and what perhaps dreams there were of the future, very different than maybe we see today. But it's an exciting time. I really appreciate the Historical Society for your contributions. Just as an example, Matt Logan and the Historical Society was one of the first groups to really help me understand the possibilities with the commission that we are doing on remembrance and reconciliation. And you already knew and had, as do other groups, but you already knew and had documented and were working on Montgomery County's own history and struggles with racial justice and with racial terror. And you communicated that to me, and we began to work together on modeling out an approach to creating community dialogue and participating in that project. And I really appreciate that. Just one very small example of the many, many things that you do. Well, it's a big example, but it's in your portfolio, you got many, many things that you're doing. So I'm really pleased to be able to present this proclamation to you today, and I'll just invite you to share some reflections on your work.
Thank you, Hans, and thank you to all the council. We have been blessed to have such a supportive group of people and leaders who recognize the value of history. And all of our work right now is really based on relevance, inclusivity, engagement, and accessibility. And I want to introduce Mr. Dan Dwyer, who's our board vice president, Sarah Hedlund, who is our librarian and the county's archivist, Laura Reese, our volunteer manager, Clarence Hickey, who celebrated his 75th anniversary on Wednesday, and so he can tell you about the climate of the days when we started in 1944, and then Elizabeth Lay, our curator. So all of these people, our team is working diligently to ensure that everyone is represented, all of the individuals in all the communities that call Montgomery County home, so that in 2094, when we're celebrating our 150th, that all those stories that are taking place, all the history that's happening right now, is part of the larger narrative. So, Hans, thank you so much.
And this Saturday you have a regular monthly meeting, is that right?
We have our annual membership meeting on Saturday morning, in which Sarah will be presenting a history of the Montgomery County Historical Society, tracing that evolution over 75 years. And then Heritage Days is this weekend, so we'll have a full menu of activities at the Belle Dawson House in Rockville on Saturday afternoon and on Sunday afternoon.
Fantastic. Well, the Montgomery County Council issues this proclamation today. Whereas Montgomery history has served as the county's historical society since 1944 by collecting, preserving, interpreting, and sharing the histories of all of Montgomery County's residents. And whereas Montgomery history currently operates 2 museums on its Rockville campus, the 1815 Belle Dawson House and the Stone Street Museum of 19th Century Medicine. Montgomery History manages an 11,000-piece collection of historic artifacts, operates the Jane C. Sween Research Library and the Montgomery County Archive, and provides a home for the county's Genealogical Society. And whereas the organization also brings scholarly and public attention to 20th century history through the Harper Center for Suburban Studies, hosts an annual history conference, operates a successful speakers bureau, and provides numerous educational and community exhibitions and events every year. And whereas Montgomery history ensures that the artifacts, documents, photographs, and other historic resources that are necessary to telling the stories of Montgomery County's residents and communities are collected and conserved in a manner that meets or exceeds professional accreditation standards and are made accessible to everyone who seeks to use them. And whereas Montgomery history engages county residents in programs that provide a better understanding of this area's history, give context to contemporary issues, and encourage community members to share their personal histories. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby honors the 75th anniversary of Montgomery history, presented today and signed by the Council President and myself. Thank you very much for your work, Matt. Really appreciate it. And we'll take a photo together, and one of these days I'm going to make it to the seminars that you host. Every time I get your newsletter, I see the amazing discussions, and I want to get to that. Can't get to as many as I'd like to. Yeah. All right.
Next, we have a proclamation recognizing Pet Adoption Month by Councilmember Glass.
Good morning, everybody. If all of my 2- and 4-legged friends could join us this morning, which happened to be serendipitous that some were joining. I left my two at home, so I'm glad we have yeah, come on over. So, so this is exciting for me. So those of you who know me know I talk about my two children, my two rescue beagles that were rescued by adoption rescue organizations right here in Montgomery County and in the DC region. Since I did not bring them with me today, I brought the closest thing. I brought some photos, right? At least I didn't bring up my iPhone and start showing them all to you. But here is my family with my Adopt t-shirt on with Daisy and Percy. And then one more is a more traditional family photo with everybody. And so they bring joy to my life. I know they bring joy to everyone's lives. And here in Montgomery County, the biggest amenity that I get asked for most often are more dog parks. And I know our Parks Department is working to bring more dog parks to the community, and that's just a testament to how much we love our four-legged friends. And so I just want to thank those of you who do this work day in and day out, share your passion and your love with all of us and all of our furry friends. I know we have Becky Robinson with Alley Cat Allies here, Chris Bamba from the Montgomery County Humane Society, Marsha Liebel with the Animal Welfare League of Montgomery County, Celestium and Cheryl Bingham with the Warrior Canine Connection, and Leah Washington with Serving Together. And then two of our furry friends, Patron and Cezanne. Thank you for... Oh, Lego, sorry. Cezanne's over there. Got it. Thank you. And so before I read the proclamation, I would like to invite Chris Bamba to come and talk about the work that's being done in the county.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass. It is a privilege and an honor to be able to represent the folks who work on behalf of the animals in our community and homeless animals 365 days a year, rescuing animals and working in animal shelters, taking them in, caring for them, providing the medical attention that they need, surgeries in some cases, providing the socialization that many of them need, and adopting them ultimately into permanent homes, loving new homes. We also represent here, and I am almost even more proud to represent the animals, the thousands of animals right here in Montgomery County that will find themselves homeless every year. And it's millions nationwide, thousands in Montgomery County. They are frightened, they are ill, they are injured, they are lonely, they are sad. I can't even get through this. And they need our help. And there are a lot of wonderful people working on behalf of them, a lot of wonderful adopters out in the community. We need more adopters. And so I applaud Montgomery County, Councilmember Glass and Montgomery County Council for putting forth this proclamation and making pet adoption a priority in our community and amplifying the need for it and the importance of taking care of the animals in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very, yeah, give Chris a round of applause. And it wasn't until Chris mentioned it, on the council and the council's lead on vulnerable and homeless communities, homelessness and vulnerable communities, and realized it extended to our pet community as well, but I guess that does. So I'm proud to read this proclamation from the County Council of Maryland. Proclamation, whereas residents of Montgomery County include 1.1 million wonderful children and adults. We also celebrate the hundreds of thousands of two- and four-legged friends that are members of our family and provide us with undeniable joy and unconditional love. And whereas many of the dogs, cats, bunnies, birds, and other animals that live in our homes and hold special places in our hearts were rescued from breeders, found stray after natural disasters, or needed new homes after owners were unable or unwilling to care for them. And whereas we thank the animal-loving community for supporting our rescue partners, veterinary practices, pet stores, and wildlife rehabilitation centers and sanctuaries for their love and support through volunteer efforts, donations, fostering activities, and adopting those animals in need. And whereas our animal rescue partner organizations help hundreds of residents every year find tens of thousands of animals to enter into their homes and receive the proper medical care, such as spaying and neutering, rabies vaccinations, and surgeries to improve their physical health. And whereas we thank everyone who follows the motto, adopt, don't shop. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County hereby recognizes and celebrates June 2019 as Pet Adoption Month, signed by Council President Nancy Navarro and myself. Thank you. I don't know how we included some of the dogs in the photo. Wonderful.
I have to give a special shout out to my grand furry baby who I'm babysitting this week, and that's why I have bags under my eyes, because he wakes me up at 5 o'clock in the morning and makes sure I take him out, and I'm not used to that. But hello to all the beautiful rescues, including Fez. All right, so now we're on to item C, and this is a proclamation recognizing PTSD Awareness Month by Council Members Albornoz, Councilmember Rice, and Councilmember Glass.
Everybody's here who is here for this proclamation, if you could please join us. Well, good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure and honor to be with all of you today. We have representatives from the Commission on Veterans Affairs. We also have representatives from Everymind and the Warrior Canine Connection, as well as the Treehouse Child Advocacy Center, who are all with us this morning to acknowledge this very important occasion. June is National Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month, and PTSD has really, unfortunately, in many ways, become part of the vernacular that most people are aware of what the acronym stands for. Good that we are raising awareness, but acknowledging the challenges that PTSD brings and the thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people around the world who experience PTSD because of significant traumatic stress that they've experienced. Often many of our veterans coming back from serving our country, but also children separated at the border from their parents, people who are the victims of domestic violence. So many people, our neighbors, our friends, people in our families experiencing this every day. And so it's important that we as a council and we as a community acknowledge that this is occurring in our community and that we do everything possible to address it. I'm honored to be joined by my colleagues in the Health and Human Services Committee, but I know all of our colleagues on the County Council are especially committed to ensuring we provide every service available to those vulnerable populations who are especially in need. I want to now invite my colleagues from the HHS Committee to say a few comments, and I'll start with my colleague, Councilmember Craig Rice.
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz. And let me just say that when it comes to our Vietnam veterans especially, we didn't have that diagnosis that was so liberally applied as it is now, but that also provided service for those members who served in that theater that was incredibly challenging for them, both mentally, emotionally, and socially when they came back home. And so now what we're seeing is late onset PTSD from a lot of our Vietnam veterans. And my father, who served in the Vietnam War, who continues to struggle each and every day with health complications as well, we all see it and we all know. And we have members who are here in front of us who have served in Vietnam and can tell you not only about the challenges that they faced, but also about the challenges that their friends who served with them faced as well. And so it's really important for us to ensure that the healthcare services, that the mental health support that we provide is available. It's the reason why We now have the VA Center that's in Gaithersburg, right here in Montgomery County, that continues to provide connections for veterans who need it. We have a very large population of veterans here in Montgomery County that represent the Washington metropolitan area. And I'm also so thankful for organizations like Warrior Canine Connection, because I will tell you, we had a dog, and my children and I weren't home enough to care for Cody, and realized that Cody would best serve my father. And I can't tell you how great it is to see the love between my father and our dog, and it really says something about that special bond that's there that really does help to combat some of the challenges that we see that our veterans face. And so I really want to thank Warrior Canine Connection for understanding the love that a pet means and what it can do to folks who have served and are continuously challenged each and every day. So thank you for all the great work that each and every one of you do.
Thank you, Chair Albornoz, for issuing this proclamation today, and thank you to my colleague Councilmember Rice for sharing your personal story. I love hearing that, and thank you to our veterans and service providers. The statistics are alarming that 7 to 8% of the population experience some form of trauma in their life and evolves into PTSD. And whether it is serving in the military or having other traumatic experiences, similar to ones that we're experiencing today here in this country and in this region with immigrants who are facing obstacles coming to this country or facing obstacles along the border. These are issues that we as a community and as a culture are going to have to deal with, and that's why this is critically important to address head on and to provide all the support services so that we can make all residents and all members of our community feel whole. Thank you.
Point of privilege, my uncle, Patricio Albornoz, is in the audience, who is an Army veteran, so thank you for your service. And speaking on behalf of the Commission on Veterans Affairs, Mr. Bill Gray will now say a few words.
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz, Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Glass. I'm a former chair of the Vietnam Commission on Veterans Affairs. I'm also a member of Vietnam Vets of America here in Silver Spring. But I'm here today to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. Some people have now dropped the disorder. But I'd like to thank Serving Together, Every Mind, Warrior Canine for working with our vets. Serving Together is a group which coordinates veterans who are dealing both with PTSD and financial problems to get them the service they need. Warrior Canine, as was just said, they work with vets, the animals that help these different people with all manner of help, both opening doors. The other day I saw a service dog pick up a license off the floor so that a vet could pick something up, or anybody disabled. And one does not have to be a vet, as was just mentioned, to experience post-traumatic stress. My friend Charlie Scheib is a combat medic in Vietnam. Mike Subin was served during the Vietnam War. And we are here. I'm also representing Wayne Miller, who's the director of the Vet Center here in Silver Spring. He's a Marine vet, Vietnam vet, lost his left leg. He has 4 other counselors with him, 3 of whom are vets. And I called Wayne this morning to get a number. Since the beginning of the year, the Silver Spring Vet Center alone has worked with 3,578 veterans. And they work with people dealing with post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, family counseling, marriage counseling, sexual trauma counseling, and I don't know how many vet centers there are throughout the country, at least 300, but it's a great service that we receive. So thank you for bringing it to the fore.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, these are the best behaved dogs I've ever seen. All right, we have a proclamation that we are now going to read. Proclamation. Whereas the month of June in National Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder PTSD Awareness Month, and Montgomery County joins the nation in openly discussing the causes, symptoms, and treatment for those with PTSD. And whereas PTSD can occur after a person experiences trauma, including but not limited to combat, sexual assault, child abuse, bombings, accidents, natural disasters, and it affects approximately 8 million adults annually. And whereas PTSD is associated with chemical changes in the body's hormonal and autonomic nervous systems, and symptoms include flashbacks, nightmares, insomnia, avoidance, hypervigilance, anxiety, and depression, and whereas PTSD can impact anyone at any time in their life, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, economic status, or educational backgrounds, and whereas combat-related PTSD stress among our men and women in the armed forces is significantly pronounced, given their frequent exposure to highly traumatic events for weeks, months, and even years, and whereas children who experience severe prolonged stress resulting from injury, violence, or the death of a close family member or friend may be affected long-term, and whereas, despite its treatability, many cases of PTSD remain undiagnosed and untreated due to a lack of awareness of this condition and the persistent stigma associated with mental health conditions. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby proclaim the month of June 2019 as Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month, and call upon our residents to reach out to their families, friends, neighbors, and networks to provide support and encourage people to seek the array of high-quality services our county's public and private sectors provide to those suffering with PTSD. Signed by myself and our Council President, Nancy Navarro, on this 25th day of June, 2019. Thank you. Why don't we get together for a picture, and I also want to acknowledge my friend Mike Subin, former council member who has served our country and our nation in so many ways.
Okay, wonderful. Now we're on to general business, and I'll turn it over to our clerk, Ms. Lamarcy.
Thank you. Good morning. We do have an addendum this morning on the consent calendar, items 2D and E, both supplemental appropriations having to do with bus rapid transit. The public hearing for those two items has been moved up to July 16th at 7:30 p.m. On item 13A, Mr. Rice has been added as a co-sponsor for Bill 20-19, Landlord-Tenant Relations, Licensing of Rental Housing and Fee Exemptions. And item 11, which was scheduled for a public hearing and action today, expedited Bill 16-19, Special Capital Improvements Project for the Goody Landfill Remediation Project. Both the public hearing and the action on that item have been deleted from today's agenda. The council did receive a petition signed by 29 persons in the county who are opposing ZTA 1901 accessory residential use, accessory apartments.
And I will share that we did receive a note from Ms. Mary Beck this morning at 8:26 with regards to item number 11, where she indicates that because this particular construction won't occur until late FY20 or early FY21, the county executive has asked staff to resubmit special projects legislation for this project closer to the expected construction start date, when they will also have updated cost figures. So that is the reason why that particular item was removed from the agenda. All right, so we have distributed the minutes of May 23rd. Are there any amendments? Hearing none, those are approved. Okay, now we're on to item number 2, and that is the consent calendar. Is there a motion? Moved by Councilmember Rice, second by Council Vice President Katz. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to thank our crack senior legislative analyst, Blaise DeFazio, for this terrific report on the student loan market demand study and cost analysis. I was able to work with Blaise closely, and my staff was as well, Dave Keens especially, and it's a great work on a very important topic that's getting a lot of attention in the presidential debate, among other things. So thanks very much, Blaise, for your hard work. And Chris as well. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see any other lights. All those in favor of adopting the consent calendar, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous among those present. All right, so now on to item 2.5. This is action, the resolution to amend the 2016-2020 subdivision staging policy in association with blighted condemned buildings or affordable housing. The Fed committee recommends approval with amendments. And so I will turn it over to Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Council President. All right, so the committee took up the subdivision staging policy amendment that was drafted by Councilmember Rice as the lead sponsor, and I joined him as a co-sponsor. And the original proposal is a very targeted, still is a very targeted proposal intended to ensure that when the county is in moratorium, when parts of the county are in moratorium, a small affordable housing project or a small project in a blighted building could nevertheless move forward. And so the basics of the amendment are described on the top of page 2. It's an amendment to allow a project with housing to be approved in a cluster or individual school service area that is in moratorium if the project would generate 10 or fewer school students and either replaces or remediates a blighted building or has more than 50% of the units set aside for those who have less than 60% of the area media income. We will get into the very details of this in a moment. I also just feel compelled to say something about I think I'll wait for comments actually to say something about the moratorium overall. I think about 12% of the county is now in moratorium. Multiple schools are in moratorium despite our best efforts to fund school construction. You know, the council has been very aggressive about adding funding to the capital budget. We have 3 high school projects in the capital budget, adding substantial numbers of new seats at the high school level to MCPS. Nevertheless, our ability to build that is just 1 year shy of the moratorium window, which results in a number of those schools' boundary areas going into moratorium. And unfortunately, those are areas that are, not surprisingly, where people want to live, where development wants to happen, is where the best opportunity is to get new investment. So it's unfortunate that the Walter Johnson cluster is in moratorium, the Blair cluster is in moratorium, and so on. You've got parts of the county where, you know, we are most able to get the benefit of new investment to build the plans, the master plan visions that we have. So this amendment that Councilmember Rice drafted, that I supported, is intended to at least, provide a way forward for a very few number of projects. The planning staff looked carefully through all the applications and determined that there were only there were only 3 buildings, I think, that were identified as blighted. So on that category, really very few buildings would qualify, so no concern about, this having unintended consequences. And then we looked through the applications for affordable developments. The committee had some discussion about that. I'll ask Glenn to describe the conclusion, but basically, I think at least 2 members of the committee support the affordable allowance. And we learned over the weekend from Montgomery Housing Partnership that indeed there are several buildings that they have that would qualify. However, they have one that won't. They have an affordable project on Sligo Avenue, just up the block from the blighted building that will not qualify and is stuck in moratorium, which, I don't think really meets anyone's objectives. And is a giant dirt pit there now, and has been there for many years. So there were a number of amendments proposed. Some were accepted, some were not. We'll get into those. But why don't I turn it to Glenn to walk us through the decision points for the discussion.
Before we do that, let me turn it over to Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I just wanted to briefly say, and thank you very much, Chair Reamer and members of the Fed Committee for doing very diligent work in terms of analyzing this, and I think coming up with an amended resolution that still gets us exactly where we want to be. As chair of the Education and Culture Committee, let me just say that I'm incredibly sensitive to ensuring that we're not overburdening our schools and overburdening our classrooms and our teachers. But at the same time, our schools are products of our community. And from that perspective, there are folks in our community who still suffer not only for the challenge of affordable housing options, but also for areas in our community that are blighted, that reduce property values and create issues when it comes to just the overall aesthetics of communities. And we don't want that. We want to encourage investment in all of our communities and make sure that that happens. And so I really appreciate folks weighing in, MCC PTA, who weighed in very thoughtfully in terms of supporting this, although they understood that this might mean some additional students. And we gave a lot of thought into what those numbers may be and considered what that sweet spot number may be. I really just want to thank everyone for working together to come up with a way in which we can continue to move forward in terms of making sure that these projects that are promoting affordable housing and reducing some of the blight that we see in our communities can happen and coincide with us still understanding that we need to ensure that we're not overburdening our classrooms and our school systems. And so just wanted to say that at the onset. I'll have a couple comments about a couple of amendments, but I think that where Fed has landed is great in terms of continuing to move us forward and does give us a nice layer of groundwork when it comes to us taking up the SSP later on this year. So thank you, Madam President.
Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to my colleagues. I was juggling 2 committees that day, a public safety hearing on community policing, but I was here for the first half of this committee and thought I whispered to Hans that I was in favor of this, but, but I don't know if we can even do that, but I am in favor of it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I am in support of this very limited exception here, and as is noted, later I'm also in support. We'll talk about the amendments. I think this strikes a good balance. Obviously, very concerned about school capacity, but this is a small program or exception that will help increase housing in an area where it's needed. And I know we'll have a larger discussion in SSP, and we'll talk about the amendments. But I just wanted it to be noted that I am in favor of the bill.
Okay, and last prefatory comment. The planning staff is about to initiate the subdivision staging policy rewrite. This is a 4-year cycle that we take up this very comprehensive set of rules about development. So it's far-reaching, and it's kicking off now. If it hasn't kicked off already, it'll be kicking off momentarily. The council will receive the draft of this rewrite proposal in like 18 months or something like that.
August 1st next year.
August 1st next year, so a year. So fundamentally, the whole policy is up for discussion and consideration. There'll be stakeholders with input at every step. There'll be a huge community process, and I think we don't know what the recommendation will be, where everything's on the table. As we approach this amendment, I felt that we ought to just not try to make assumptions that what we're doing now is, everything will be rewritten one way or the other. Some things will be kept, some things will be changed in a new policy. So we don't need to get too worked up about exactly how the forever consequences of specific components of this, because we're going to have another chance to review anything. Everything that will be in this subdivision staging policy will be up for review. So I felt like that was just important because it might help to take the temperature down. I'm not sure if it did or it didn't, but I do also want to join Councilmember Rice in thanking the PTA. I thought their participation in this was very thoughtful and very precise, as always. And I think right off the bat, got the need here and got the value here and came to the table in a very constructive way. So I wanted to just also salute that. Much appreciated. Okay, Glenn.
So yeah, before you push that button, I just want to observe very briefly that I understand that we're going to get into a much more thorough conversation with our SSP, and that this is very targeted in many ways. But when I hear things like we want to make sure that we incentivize development going forward in desired areas of the county, it does concern me a bit, because I know that right now, as I'm a member of the COG housing work group, we're going to have to grapple with a lot of issues with regards to how we address the provision of housing, the affordability, how do we concentrate those around activity centers and transit-oriented areas. And so it's no secret that, in my district, we have, 2 particular areas where you have metro stations and where it's very underutilized. And so to a certain extent, I think that we need to be mindful that, as we try to, in some ways, address issues of moratorium in areas deemed as desirable, we may be exacerbating the issue by not forcing or incentivizing certain activity in areas where we have underutilized, transit, for example. So, just for me, I'm just keeping this as a very general as well as trying to be very holistic in terms of how we move forward. So although I support this and I think it's important, we are going to have to grapple with that kind of broader conversation about how are we actually ensuring that all areas of the county benefit and are incentivized. And so with that, Dr. Orland, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Just a little bit of background. The school test does look 5 years in the future, and it compares the enrollment forecast from the school system to the capacity that's programmed in the CIP. Just this last Thursday, the planning board certified the results of the test for fiscal year 20, which will start on Monday. And it shows that 4 high school clusters will go into moratorium, will be in moratorium. Blair already is in moratorium. It'll go for 1 more year. Einstein, Walter Johnson, and Blake will also be in moratorium. There are 13 individual school service areas that'll be in moratorium. Now, some of those individual school service areas, elementary school service areas, are part of one of those 4 clusters of high schools, so it's a little bit of double counting there in terms of areas in moratorium. Also, in most cases, there isn't any development, residential development, which is foreseen in the next year in many of these areas. So, frankly, the impact of these moratoria, even though if it's 12% of the county, is relatively small. There are a couple large projects that we know about that'll be in moratorium for a year. They'd have to come back next year. Beyond that, we're talking about 1 or 2 here or there. This particular amendment was designed to try to exempt a couple of specific properties that have been identified that are supported by the community. One is 850 Sligo Avenue in Silver Spring, which is an office building which is vacant and considered blighted, and a parking lot is part of that. It has been vacant for a number of years. The developer there actually got approval earlier this year from the planning board to redevelop it with senior housing, which is fine under the school test. Even though it's in Blair, senior housing is exempt because it doesn't generate students. However, he changed his mind and decided he really wanted to have this development be not have the age restriction, and that's what kicks off this issue for that one. And then Montgomery Housing Partnership had a project nearby. Mr. Reamer referred to it. However, the exemption that was proposed by Mr. Rice and co-sponsored by Mr. Reamer doesn't go high enough in terms of the number of students. It's 10 students or less, and my understanding from MHP is that actually that development would generate 11 students. However, they have two other developments that they have in the offing, and Mr. Sartori brought this up at the work session, and we double checked it, and in fact one in Forest Glen and one in White Flint would in fact be eligible under part 2 of this exemption. So we identify basically 3 projects that would be exempted, all in different clusters: the 850 Sligo and Blair, the Forest Glen development in Einstein, and the White Flint development in Walter Johnson. The changes that the committee made were really relatively minor, mostly word changes to reflect what words are actually referred to in the law and which ones are not. The word blighted really doesn't exist in the code anywhere, so blighted came out, but condemned stayed in. The planning board made the good point that it should apply not just to previously condemned, but also currently vacant structures, so you don't have a situation where a property was condemned at some point in the past and then it was remediated and actually is occupied now. We didn't want to have an exemption for that, so that takes care of that. Mr. Hucker mentioned that the affordable housing units should be referring to units for households rather than for families, because that's an important distinction, and that originally the exemption was to apply the first exemption, Part 1, having to do with the condemned buildings, for those that are either within or adjacent to opportunity zones. And through a lot of discussion about the right type of word, it ended up being within, abutting, or confronting. But what that really means is if you're in the opportunity zone, or if you're immediately adjacent, immediately next to, abutting the zone, or if you cross the street from the zone, you can fall under this exemption. Again, as long as you don't generate more than 10 students. The only disagreement in the committee had to do with MCCPTA's comment about limiting this to one development per impacted school. And their worry was that there might be a situation where you might have 2 or 3 or 4 developments in the same cluster, say in Blair or anywhere else. And so instead of being 10 students that are added, it might be 20 or 30 or 40. As it turns out, that's not the case. There's only one of these things in 3 different clusters, but the point they wanted to make was not to be able to allow more than that. Mr. Friedson agreed with that. Mr. Reamer did not. In this case, I pulled Mr. Jawanda, who told me that he agreed with Mr. Friedson. So, and now the committee recommendation is a 3-0 recommendation based on what you said, Mr. Jawanda. So I would suspect then the committee's recommendation is to include MCCPTA's condition. Again, it won't have any effect because there aren't 2 in the same cluster. And I think that's where I think I'll leave it. Well, I'll take it back. There are a couple things that were suggested and were not included. I had suggested there be a sunset on the condemned, on basically both conditions of July 1st next year, because these areas will come out of moratorium next year. The committee disagreed with that. I'll note that the executive, we finally received comments from him late last week. He does agree with the sunset, but the committee does not. And then secondly, the planning board, based on a comment from Mr. Dreyfus, had recommended that the de minimis test for schools, the school test, be changed from 3 units to 10 students, which actually is a much larger exemption, or exempts a lot more properties than what is perceived here, and frankly would make moot everything else, because if that passes, then it doesn't matter whether you have 50% affordable housing, or if you're a blighted building, or you're an extra opportunity zone or not. If the de minimis is 10 or less, all these developments and many, many more would be approved. The committee unanimously disagreed with that. So with that, that's sort of the background on this issue.
Thank you. Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Glenn, can you, I'm concerned about the term condemned. Does that mean that it has to formally be condemned by the county or the entity that would be doing and does that mean that somebody who has a blighted, quote unquote, piece of property is going to wait for it to be condemned before they would try to get this exemption?
The answer to your question is yes, it has to be formally condemned or previously condemned and still vacant. It may not be condemned anymore, but it's still vacant once it had been condemned. And blighted is a term of art. There's no real definition of what blighted is. It's in the eye of the beholder. And so that makes it very difficult for a regulatory situation like this to just determine, is this building blighted or not? Well,
and I know in the historic definitions, they have a condemnation by neglect. Could we do something? I'm just concerned that somebody is just going to wait with a piece of property that everybody's saying, look, somebody should do something with this thing, and that they're going to wait for to get to the point that it's actually that much worse rather than to the point where they should try to be doing something with it. That, to me, is a concern.
Well, I think Mr. Reamer noted that really all of these two exemptions are really geared towards just a couple of developments, and the entire SSP is up for grabs in next fall, not this coming fall, but the following fall, and this kind of issue can be addressed. I think my guess is there'll be the planning staff and board will look at multiple variations of the balance between affordable housing, for example, and school overcrowding, or between blighted buildings, condemned buildings, and overcrowding, and maybe come up with a more comprehensive answer. This was really only to address a couple of properties. It really was not a county.
No, and I understand that, but that's for today. And I understand we're going to be getting into this next year, and right. By August, sometimes August doesn't happen until a little later than August, and hopefully it'll be on time.
By law they have to, otherwise they go to SSP jail.
But that's always comforting. That's very comforting. But my concern on this, it's to make somebody wait when something is that bad, and we can all agree what it is, to say because we don't have a definition for blighted, let's see if we can come up with something that would correct that. That's my point. I have no problem with these three properties at this point.
Sure, the committee members may want to speak to this. I know Mr. Friedson raised the point about what if a house burns down, and rather than just letting it sit there, can something happen? And I think if something like that happens, I think the council might want to take another look at this kind of thing. But that was part of the discussion in Fed committee the other day.
Okay, thank you.
I also want to do a time check, so I think that, unless there are particular amendments, obviously this is a much more tailored and focused proposal, but we are going to have plenty of discussion once the SSB comes back. But we do have a number of items this morning that we're going to have to get to. Councilwoman Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and I'll just be very brief. As the lead sponsor, I do support and accept MCC PTA's recommendation about affected only once per year. I think that it makes sense and is in the spirit of what we were looking at anyway in terms of saying that 10 is 10, and 10 is the impact that we limit it to. So I see that as a friendly amendment. Just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for that. Thank you to the committee for its work. And I think to the Council Vice President's point and to Glenn's point, I think the idea was this to be very targeted. We tried to keep in that spirit during the committee's work. There's a lot of other things to address and deal with that we're going to have an opportunity to deal with. Obviously, there's some real challenges here, but my view is if the burning building example happens, then we should address that as a council again in a very specific and targeted way to try to broaden this out to capture every single potential outcome would create a greater problem, I think, than the trouble that it would cause to go back and do something similar to this that is targeted and responsible. So I appreciate the comment. I think it's a legitimate comment. We didn't specifically talk about that, although we talked about a similar issue as staff just mentioned. But I think that should a scenario happen where there's a significant public interest, like in this case, to address it, we should address it at that time with specific and targeted legislation, like was thoughtfully done here by the sponsors.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have a committee recommendation to approve with amendments. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous among, it's unanimous. Thank you so much. All right. Okay, so now we will go on to item number 3. And this is a resolution to approve the tax-supported fiscal plan summary for the FY 20 to 25 public service program. And I want to thank my colleagues on the GO committee, Council Vice President Katz and Councilmember Friedson, for their work here. Basically, this is a requirement by the county charter, and the executive must submit a comprehensive 6-year program for public services, and we must approve the program at or about date of the budget. Attached are the proposed resolutions. They are in your packet in the tax-supported fiscal plan summary for FY 20 to 25 public services program based upon the fiscal decisions the council approved on May 23rd, 2019. And those are on circles 1 to 4. Basically, the 6-year fiscal plan for FY 20 to 25 is balanced, as it has been since the council approved certain fiscal policies in 2010. And the tax-supported fiscal plan summary is basically a snapshot in time. We always use that phrase because that's exactly what it is. And the council will receive updates in December 2019 and in March 2020 with the executive's recommended FY 21 budget. Revenues are anticipated to increase modestly, and I will emphasize that, modestly, during the 6-year fiscal plan, and resources available for agency users are also anticipated to increase modestly. The 6-year fiscal plan maintains the council's fiscal policies for reserves and OPEB. The council will meet its goal of 10% reserves by 2020. Also, I should know that the GO committee is going to begin a very thorough and deliberative review of all of our fiscal policies to make sure that we should continue with particular targets and particular criteria and see how we can best position ourselves. We might find that what we have in place now is just fine, but it is important to do that type of review outside of the budget process. So therefore, the GO committee has reviewed and recommends approval on the subject resolution. All right, I don't see any lights. So with that, all those in favor of adopting the resolution, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you so much. Okay. So now we are on to action. This is item 3.5, and this is confirmation of County Executive's appointee as the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Raymond Kroll. It's very good to see you here this morning, and so before we get started, I do need a motion. Moved by Councilmember Friedson, seconded by Councilmember Rice. And Dr. Kroll, we had a very, I think, robust conversation during your interview. Obviously, we know you well, and I believe that this is an excellent choice that the executive has made. It is no secret that we continue to struggle with issues with regards to behavioral health and mental health, and you've been leading that fight for quite a while. And now you are going to be presiding basically over this very important department, and there are so many other issues of great importance. But I think that the previous director, Ms. Uma Aluwalia, did an excellent job, I think, in making sure that she would position this department with a very, very specific strategic plan and also a vision. And I think that you are very well poised to go in there and address many of these issues, considering also that you have a partner here on the county council that has always prioritized health and human services and understands that budgets are a moral document and that we have quite a bit of need out there. And the safety net has always been a priority. I can think back during the recession, the safety net was the one thing that we said, we have got to prioritize this even through that very difficult time. So I'm so glad that you stepped up, and I want to acknowledge, I believe that Mrs. Kroll is in the audience, and I want to thank her for, giving sort of the green light. Like my husband always says, check with the boss, and, I guess he checked with the boss, and everything is good, and I do appreciate that, because this is a very critical appointment. And so before we vote, let me turn over to Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President. And I often say check with management, but same thing as the boss. Management sounds a little, weightier. So, Mrs. Kroll, thank you for being here. And I just wanted to say briefly, Dr. Kroll, so excited that you're going to be taking on this responsibility and this challenge, but also a great opportunity to serve all of our many, many diverse populations where we have a lot of need. You and I, the thing I'm most excited is that you do direct service. You deal with our youth. We've worked together on disconnected and opportunity youth issues, students of color, and other issues. So I know you're going to be hands-on as well as your great expertise in the mental health arena, which many of my colleagues, we just talked about PTSD today, and there's so many issues in that area, whether it be with our youth and our young people and our teens. And so I'm excited for what you do. You have a great partner here on the council with all of us, and just wanted to say congratulations personally to you.
And Chair of our HHS Committee on the Council, Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Council President Navarro. Dr. Crowell, it is going to be great serving along with you. I've had the opportunity to see you in action for the last 10 years, and I know how committed you are to our community. I know how resourceful you are, and I know how hard you work. And you're going to need all of those attributes and many more, but we stand ready to work alongside you as partners in our effort to enhance the quality of life of all of our county residents, but especially those most vulnerable. And we look forward to the partnership. Congratulations, and I'm looking forward to this vote.
All right, so with that, all those in favor of appointing Dr. Raymond Kroll to the position of Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Congratulations. Now we know who we need to call. Thank you so much. Thank you. Congratulations. Okay, so item number 4 is action on appointments to Montgomery County Planning Board and designation of chair. And so we will begin. We have 2 appointments to make to the Planning Board. We have to appoint the chair and also a member. And so we're going to get right into it. We already had, I think, very robust interviews. It was quite, I think, an important process. But let's get to the business, and then I'll make some remarks. All right, so we're going to start with the appointment to the Planning Board for the position of chair. Is there a motion? Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Council President Navarro. Okay. Well, I would like to make a motion to nominate Casey Anderson as chair of the Planning Board. And I'm really pleased to be able to do that this morning. I first met Casey in 2006, long before I was elected to the council and before he was appointed to the Planning Board. We used to spend hours talking, usually about the revitalization of Silver Spring and smart growth, or how to build support for the Purple Line. He impressed me right away as knowledgeable, passionate, and thoughtful. It was clear to me that he cared deeply about the future of our community and about everyone in our community. Since getting appointed to the Planning Board and later being designated as chair, Casey has played a central role in just about every major decision we have made about land use, transportation, and our park system. He has poured his energy into helping make Montgomery County both more equitable and more prosperous. Casey has helped to conceive and build support for a wide-ranging set of progressive ideas and projects, from the Purple Line and Bus Rapid Transit to the White Oak and Bethesda master plans, from urban parks and athletic fields to affordable housing, and quantitative measures
of equity in bike and pedestrian infrastructure investments. I think it's terrific that so many of our economic development community leaders are here today to witness his appointment. I know he works closely on crucial economic development issues for the county, and he is a leader at that table. Under his leadership, the Planning and Parks Department has been tremendously productive, delivering award-winning projects and plans and providing insight and analysis into the council's work on economic development and demographic change, as well as housing and transportation. Casey has won the respect of elected officials, business and civic leaders, and he's developed strong relationships with other agencies in state and county government, such as the State Highway Administration and our school system, MCPS. So as we prepare to update the general plan, a document adopted in 1964, Casey's unconventional thinking, creativity, and intelligence will help us to frame the issues that will set the course of our planning efforts for decades to come. Casey is committed to equitable and sustainable growth in which people of diverse backgrounds, skills, and interests live side by side in mixed income communities with access to jobs, educational opportunities, and housing choices. Casey has proven many times that he is an innovative thinker and effective leader. I believe that his skills, knowledge, and experience will be an even more important asset to the council and to the Park and Planning Commission in the years ahead. And that's why I nominate him for appointment to another term as chair of the Planning Board.
Well, it has been seconded by Council Vice President Katz. Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Candidly, Hans did just say it all, and so I'm not going to repeat that. But I did want to mention that I've actually been with Casey when he's visited the parks, and he's certainly visited a whole lot more parks than I did. Didn't bring his bicycle when I saw him, but he's visited the many, many parks. I've been with him when he's greeted the people who work on the parks, and they stood there and chatted with them to hear what they had to say and the various discussions. And I know how much he truly cares about Montgomery County, and it shows every day, Casey, and how he knows that we need to listen and we need to learn. And Montgomery County is going through some difficult moments in various forms. And we're all going to work together to make certain that we get to a better place quickly. And I believe Casey is the very, very person that can do that for us. So I'm looking forward to voting for you.
All right. Is there any discussion or any opposition? Hearing none, then by acclamation, Mr. Casey Anderson is reappointed as chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. Congratulations. If you'd like to come, Casey, like to come to the table. Mr. Anderson, if you would like to come and make any brief remarks. I know, a time check, brief remark.
Well, when I clerked for a judge, I got to law school, he said, quit while you're ahead. So I'll take yes for an answer. I do want to say that I appreciate very much the confidence and support of this council as well as your predecessors. I look forward to this work. It's tremendously challenging, but that's why it's worth doing. It wouldn't be the job that I love so much if it didn't have such tremendous variety and honestly, in some cases, difficulty every single day. But that's okay, and I know that we're all in that task together. I would say that as Hans mentioned, we've been at this together for a long time, and it's never going to be done, but we know that the path forward has got to be not only to emphasize the need for economic development, growth of jobs, but also to make sure that all the wonderful things about this county are available to everyone. And that's something that has been really not at the forefront in the past. I think we all know that. And I'm deeply committed to making sure that we have a more equitable as well as economically competitive county. So thanks very much, and I appreciate working with you all on all these difficult but rewarding tasks that we have ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. You can remain seated since we're going to do our second appointment. And this is for a seat on the planning board. This is as member. Is there a motion to nominate? Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I want to just say that I think we all believe that we had a particularly impressive and talented and committed group of candidates this year. There are many examples of candidates who were not appointed on their first attempt getting appointed at a later date. So I really personally hope all the candidates stay involved and stay in touch with us. They all have a lot to contribute to this county in many different roles that they can play. But given his, this was a difficult choice, but given his proven ability to build coalitions and bring people together to find common ground in pursuit of significant improvements to our planning and our built environment, I nominate Partap Verma.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember
Madam
Reamer. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
oh, I don't see a light. Sorry. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you very much,
Does
Madam
that mean there are
President.
2 seconds?
Pardon me?
Does that mean there are 2 seconds now?
Sure.
Go for it.
Second,
Second by
third?
Councilmember Glass.
Great.
Go right ahead.
I share the sentiments of my colleague saying that the pool of applicants were fantastic, many of whom were have been engaged over the last number of years, and I hope that they all stay engaged in the coming years. But I would like to second the nomination of Mr. Partap Verma to be on the planning board. Over the last number of years, I've seen Mr. Verma show his passion for planning and on issues related to zoning, leading the efforts in Forest Glen and his support for sustainable development. And those activities of his included organizing charrettes, gatherings, street festivals, listening sessions, helping build his community to one where they can advocate for themselves and bringing positive change to their community. Mr. Verma has the knowledge and experience to steer Montgomery County towards a vision of inclusive growth, and his track record of listening to the community and helping build consensus is something that I think will serve our planning board well. And not only does Mr. Verma have the community experience to serve on the board, he also brings with him lived experiences that can't be taught. During this time of federal uncertainty with harmful actions coming across the border and from down the street in Washington, D.C., particularly related to our immigrant community, we have to ensure that those in power understand all the socioeconomic dynamics that exist here within our very diverse community, and that's really important to me. As the son of immigrants, an East County native, and a graduate of Montgomery County Public Schools, Mr. Verma understands the needs of our diverse and underserved communities. Growing up in a mixed income duplex development, he saw the value that diverse housing stock brings to our communities, and I know that he will bring that knowledge to the planning board, where he knows also that affordable housing and strong communities are not mutually exclusive. And Mr. Verma would also be the planning board's first member of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, as well as the first openly gay member, which is not lost on me here as we celebrate Pride. So I hope my colleagues join me in supporting Mr. Verma for the planning board.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass. Let's see, any discussion or opposition? Hearing no opposition, then by acclamation, Mr. Partap Verma is appointed as the newest member of the Montgomery County Planning Board. Congratulations. Congratulations. We like historic moments, so this is a very important one for us. Any remarks you'd like to, brief of course, you'd like to share with us today?
I'll keep this short and sweet, a little emotional today. Thank you so much. It wasn't too long ago I was meeting a lot of you for coffee and talking about how we can make Montgomery County more equitable and safe for everyone, and to be here is really special. So thank all of you, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Congratulations. I just want to make some remarks. Of course, I want to thank every candidate who applied to be on the Montgomery County Planning Board. The council interviewed 7 candidates for the vacant positions, And I can honestly say that in these finalists, we were confronted with an embarrassment of riches. Each candidate that we interviewed demonstrated a keen knowledge of the issues and opportunities confronting our county today, and showed passion and energy and willingness to do the work. As we deliberated on who would ultimately be appointed as Planning Board Chair and Planning Board Member, respectively, we had to really think hard about our choices, because any of our finalists presented attractive strengths that would have been an asset to our county. Ultimately, our choices reflected our conviction as a team that the Planning Board should reflect our respect for the continuity and meaningful change. Our county has changed, and we saw in the conversations about accessory dwelling units, this change comes with its own anxieties and requires leadership that is thoughtful, intentional, strategic, and transformational. It is important that all our spaces represent who we are. The choices today of Mr. Casey Anderson and Mr. Partap Verma as members represent our council's desire to ensure that the Planning Board team is a good mix of leaders who come with unique ideas for implementing a desired vision for our county. I look forward to working with Chairman Casey Anderson on issues of economic development, smart growth, pedestrian safety, expanded multimodal transportation options, and so much more. I especially welcome Mr. Verma to his new position. His approach to planning, innovative ideas, and experience in the law, diplomacy, and community advocacy will help to shape a more inclusive Montgomery County. And as it has already been noted, we are here celebrating a historic moment, and I am so proud of this particular instance. This was not an easy process for us as a council, but we did it. I would like to applaud my colleagues for the deliberative way they went about making these important decisions. Ultimately, the individual energy and convictions led us to a shared place. I again thank the finalists and hope that they will continue to avail the county of their tremendous skills and wisdom. We know that we will be reaching out to them as we confront and address the serious issues facing our county and our country. So congratulations, and now let's get to work. Congratulations again. Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, so now we're on to item number 5. And we welcome the county executive to, he was here. Well, somebody can make sure the county executive is here. All right. So basically, well, hopefully somebody can go grab the county executive. Dale. Oh, there he is. All right, cool. All right. There's a traffic jam over there. Well, we welcome the county executive, as well as Mr. Fletcher. And we also have here Mr. Gene Smith, who is a really amazing analyst who is always thinking and supporting us when it comes to issues of economic development. And so today, basically, this is going to be a conversation about our county's economic strategy moving forward. As we all know, the health of our economic development here in the county is of utmost importance to this council. And I think that, you know, this was an issue that was front and center, especially in the last campaign season. And this is one of the reasons why, as council president, I felt that it would be important for the entire council to engage in conversations about economic development as well as workforce development. But of course, we need to do this together. And this is obviously why we're here today, to hear from the county executive in terms of some of the issues that he has already addressed, and then some of the plans that are underway. I did send a memo, I believe it was June 10th, providing a chart of some of the areas that the county council is engaged in when it comes to economic development functions. And we also had sent a memo with a series of questions to guide the discussion today. I do know that we did receive today also a memo from County Executive Elrich. We received that this morning, detailing some of the areas that he's already worked on. So before we start the conversation, let me see, Mr. Smith, is there anything that you need to add?
Just a couple quick items. As noted in the packet, the executive is responsible for either updating, amending, or starting a new economic development strategy as required by county code in October of this year, and that will need to be approved currently by Method 1 regulation. So as the council president noted, today is a primer for a lot of that conversation, but the council will be seeing more of this in the months to come. Second, the council staff provided, again, background information on the county's economy and how it's changing and how it's grown or not grown in some ways following the Great Recession, and I believe that's important context in understanding how we move forward, and not only in our strategy, but in working together. And then finally, as you noted, we have materials from the executive that we received about 8:30 this morning, and so we haven't had a chance to read through all of those, but we will hear more today, and we may follow up following that conversation. So with that, I'll turn it back to the council president, who will.
All right, wonderful. All right, Executive Elrich, welcome, and we look forward to this conversation.
I hope this is, one of a series of conversations on this. I've taken the approach that, before you lead on anything, you probably ought to do a little bit of listening. And so we've spent a lot of time going around and talking to people. And, Sydney and I have been doing this tour of the business community, which I think has turned out pretty well. We've spent a lot of time meeting all over the county, had a lot of people talk to us. We've kept the comment period open. We're not even finished with this, and it'll conclude with 2 more charrettes and then a report. So we've been really trying to engage. In addition, I've spent a lot of time talking with folks in the business community and different sectors of the business community to try to get an understanding of what do they need, because it's easy to think you know what somebody else needs, but sometimes you're better off asking them what they need, and sometimes you get some really interesting answers. And I've had several conversations that where people brought up stuff that I've never heard anybody mention before as opportunities, and I thought, this is probably something we ought to go after, because they certainly made a compelling case for it. So if you we try to think about where we're trying to go. Andrew, my CEO, talks a lot about turning the curve, and I think that's Montgomery County's challenge on economic development, is turning the curve. We want to get to a place where we have a more diverse economy, that it's not just federally dependent, but not even biodependent, because that is not adequate, and the two together are not adequate to drive this economy. So we need something that goes beyond those two things. And so we need to more broadly diversify. And this is not an unfamiliar topic. You'll hear Stephen Fuller and anybody else who's pontificating about the mess in the Washington metro area, is that you've got everybody focused on the feds, and that there's real need for people to start turning their focus elsewhere. And that's as true in Montgomery County as it is anywhere else. We need to deal as best we can with income disparities, because a lot of our social problems, a lot of the the ways we wind up spending money, whether it's how you subsidize housing or how you deal with social needs, are fundamentally rooted in income inequality. So to the extent that you reduce income inequality, you reduce some of the load that the county has to carry, and that means you get to free up resources for other things. But you also have people who are producing more resources that actually strengthen the economy, rather than having people who are heavily dependent on what the government can do. So I think this council, the past council, did I think substantial good work on income inequality, and we should continue to look for opportunities to address that issue as we might. We need to deal with climate in the county, and I've made a note to myself that the Montgomery County climate is good and bad. If you look at schools in general and think about parks and services and the county in general, it's a plus climate. But in particular, we've developed a reputation for being a very difficult place to do business. Now, when you dig down deeper, and I think something Sydney and I have heard, is that people tell you everybody's difficult. Some people say you're more difficult than everybody else, but some people have made a pretty good case that there are areas where we are more difficult than anybody else. And I'd like to put that aside. I said when I was running that I would be happy to get to the place if people just said, you're not worse than anybody else in the regulatory realm. Because regulations are things we need when they're appropriate. Everybody's going to have them. You just don't want to have them where you don't need them. And I think that's a place this county definitely needs to do some work. And basically, you want to have more opportunities for everybody. I think, those of us who've been involved in the school issues for a long time share a similar regret that the attitude for years in the county was, if you're not going to college, what are you doing? And there are a whole lot of folks who aren't going to college or who may delay going to college, and there are opportunities for work and opportunities for a good future that don't rely on that, but we really haven't looked at that, and so we haven't done enough to build a broader range of opportunities for the folks in this county, and that's something I would like to do. I want to see not just economic activity at the top, where we bring in the best scientists and the best researchers, but I want the person with the cleverest idea who can put their hands on a 3D printing machine make something that is of value and that people are going to want to have. And whether it's little things or big things like the Ollie, I don't know if any of you know what the Ollie is, but the Ollie is this 11-passenger self-driving electric vehicle that's running around National Harbor that's being built locally on a 3D printer. It's an amazing thing, and there are lots more amazing things that people can do if they get the opportunity and if they get educated so they can use the tools and things we have. So we think about our assets and we think, okay, we've got vibrant urban centers. That's a plus. We have multiple. We're not like a county that has one center and that's the end of the county. We have multiple centers in the county. We have a solid basic infrastructure. We certainly have a talented workforce. We have a talented workforce and a multilingual workforce. Our diversity is truly a strength because we can be outward facing in many different directions, and that's an asset for this county. And I think, we can attribute the fact that we have this to the county's long history of being welcoming, because any of us who've been around long enough and know the history of the region, not everybody was as welcoming as Montgomery County was, as early as Montgomery County was. And I think that has kind of set the tone for this county in a really positive way. And so we have the ability to trade on that asset and take advantage of it. But we need to make sure that everybody who's got a language difference also has the same educational ability and opportunities so that they can actually multiply their talents and take full advantage of the resources and opportunities that are out there. We are highly educated. I don't know the latest statistics, but we always have ranked in the very, very top nationally of the most educated population. And that's no small thing because that gives us lots of different ways to pivot. And I think that is a true strength for this community. And on the good side and the bad side, we've got an office inventory. If we can stimulate growth, and to me, and I've argued this before, the challenge is not what the zoning is. The challenge is bringing people in to fill the buildings. You can zone for anything, but if you don't fill the buildings up, that's a problem. And I'm going to use the number that I heard when I first came on the council. We have 10 million square feet of empty commercial space, and it's about 5 million Class A and 5 million Class B, except the latest update probably pushes that number closer to 12. So somewhere between 11 and 12. So we've got space that if we can be more successful in attracting people, we have places to put them. And they would fill holes in our community where holes need to be filled. It's not to anybody's advantage to have empty office parks, empty buildings, and shopping centers that struggle. So we've got the places, we've got to develop a strategy now to fill the spaces, and that's what we're going to focus on. We also have issues we have to address. We know from, certainly what you read, and I remember back in the fall, this very interesting Washington Post article that said the biggest impediment to economic development in this region was the lack of bus networks. They didn't say metro, because metro does what metro does, but bus networks are what, in most cities, tie the cities together and enable both north-south and east-west transportation in a seamless way so you can get to work regardless of where you live in the county, not depending on whether or not you live on the red line. And we need a more robust transportation system. And we've got to deal with school construction challenges. Overcrowded schools are not something that makes this community desirable. It is something that will keep people away from the county. So we have to figure out how we're going to deal with that. And, I think the good news is that if this year's legislation legislative session is any indicator, there will be significant improvements in school funding next year. I'm reasonably optimistic that something's going to come out of this legislature that addresses the Kerwin report and gives us more money for early childhood schools in general and school construction than we've had in the past. And I think we would all welcome that opportunity. There was very strong support for it, and I was disappointed in the end that we couldn't get the funding for the construction part out of it. But the Senate leader's logic was that he wanted to make sure that all of us who were there hungry for school money showed up next year when they were going to have to figure out how to raise the taxes to pay for Kerwin. And so his approach is this is a package, and the people are going to have to stand up for the package. Mr. Rice has been involved in this deeply. And so the next year's proposal is going to be a package. And I can tell you that all of the 8 major county executives, Democratic county executives, and Barry Glassman spent a lot of time trying to reassure the Senate leadership that they could have given us the money this year for construction and we'd still be back next year. That's not the way it's going to play out. We're going to have to go back next year to get it. But we will be back. I will be back. And I know that the other county executives are going to be back. This is a priority for everybody. So we've got to figure out a way to deal with transportation. We've got to figure out a way to deal with school construction. As I said before, income inequality is an issue, and it becomes especially an issue with affordable housing. I only wish we got the $15 sooner, because the amount of housing that would be in reach of a family with 2 earners making $15 an hour is substantially more housing than what's available to people today. We're going to have to find ways to get more affordable housing, and one of the things I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to is how do we get better deals with higher percentages of affordable housing than we've been able to do in the past, but that's certainly a priority. We've got to create a sense of place. I talked to some people who are considered, leaders in the economic development field, and, one of them in particular is a significant person in the world of placemaking and sort of the gig economy and the incubator economy and all the stuff that people think is hot and hip. And he says Montgomery County struggles with the image of there's no there there. That you've got nice schools and you've got, Bethesda has its assets and Silver Spring has its assets, but there's nothing that people identify as a there. And that what you need to do is create a there. And we've had conversations revolving around the particular potential development project where the current owner and potential partner have both talked a lot about the there, and that the next phase of this will not be give me the zoning and I'll build a series of buildings and hope that somebody comes, but they want to create a place that people want to come to start with. Absent the buildings and absent, whatever is going to get built, the notion is to create a place that has a sense about it that people want to be in. And people talk about Kennett Square, they talk about Port Covington and Baltimore, places that are being designed to be destinations in and of themselves, not just places that people go to work and then leave. And I think that's important to think about that. And as I said before, we need to diversify the economy beyond the Fed and beyond bio. The interesting thing about the bio world is sometimes bio doesn't want to grow up. Sometimes bio wants to be adopted and acquired. And so you get companies that get off the ground, and a lot of the small companies don't have the money for phase 2 and phase 3 trials. And their hope is to get through phase 1 and get acquired. And so you can put money, you can look at new bio startups, but every bio startup is not destined to become MedImmune. And a lot of them would just like to be part of MedImmune and to have safe landings for their scientists and their leaders, but not necessarily grow all the way. So we need a broader approach to developing the economy, and that's one of the things we're going to look at. So in terms of a strategic framework, we're going to focus on how do we move people and goods efficiently in the county. And so we're beginning to relook at the bus rapid transit system. We've had conversations with the state. You'll notice now that the state now includes discussions about the CCT in their long-term transportation plans. This is a big deal because if life sciences in Shady Grove is supposed to be, go to stage 2 and stage 3, if the development people want to see in Germantown is going to happen, that transit's got to be there. It's absolutely critical. And so the fact that the governor is willing to have this discussion, and we have to deal with the routes. So we will come back with a revised route, and it'll go through the planning board. But, you know, the lesson or the message from the state is pretty clear. You put a long, slow loop in it, we're not paying for it. If you make this thing more direct and efficient, then you've got a partner. And I want that partner because I don't want to be stopped at stage 2. And I remember we had these discussions, you know, when this whole thing started, and people who knock on the door over there and are told you have to wait until somebody puts the CCT into a budget again before you go to stage 2, they're not going to wait and say, you know, okay, let us know when you're ready. They'll go find someplace else that accommodates them. So we've got to figure out how do we build a transit system that gets us where we need to be, that lets us go forward and unleash some of the stuff that we think is possible to happen up there. We're going to continue to work, and the council shares the same view I do on I-270. We are going to push to get a 2-lane reversible system up and down that road, which doesn't require the kind of enormous expense. It's not going to be cheap, but it doesn't require the enormous expense of what was originally proposed. And we think that's important for the Up County and important for transportation in general in the county. And we're going to continue to work with the governor, partner with us on Metro, because we cannot afford any retreat from the funding of Metro. That's absolutely critical. We've seen what happens when Metro struggles. Metro needs to get stable long enough that people fully have confidence that it's not just the new normal, but this is the permanent normal, not just a blip in the radar. We need to do a better job developing our workforce. And so, again, this council shares a common goal of dealing with early childhood education. And that is absolutely an economic development strategy. And the better we are at it, the more likely we're able to attract young families here. Because people who struggle with childcare, every place you go, there is not a place in the country where childcare comes cheap, particularly quality childcare. So to the extent that we are successful and we are leaders in this, we are going to be more attractive to businesses who want to locate here and are looking to bring a young workforce here, because those families will know that they will be able to find childcare for their kids, and hopefully affordable childcare for the kids, which we think is something that's going to make us a more attractive place. And again, we seem to have a partner in the state. There's good news in terms of where they're going with funding. If we do our part, we think we can do, I think a really good job with this. At the other end, we need to do a better job in high school with just getting kids ready for work, wherever they want to work. Not just, are you ready for college, but are you ready for the trades? Are you ready to be a plumber, an electrician? Are you ready to fool around with 3D printers or other, forms of additive manufacturing? We need to make sure that everybody who leaves school has a path in front of them other than folks who are going to college, and I think that's critical. And I thought that, the project we tried to pull off in Silver Spring with the building there and with the school system was really the right idea. And I just regret the fact that the price on that building got so astronomical, and we have not been able to negotiate a price to a point that makes any sense. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't look for other opportunities. In fact, and I agree with the superintendent, there need to be several of those schools in the county. It would make sense to have one in the down county, the south, and the north. And the other side of this is it actually addresses some of the school overcrowding issues at the high school level. Because if you put enough seats in 3 campuses, you could put the equivalent of a high school in 3 campuses, and that would take some of the load off our school construction in general. So I think there's multiple reasons for us to look at this and look at it as not just strictly an add to what we'd have to build, but possibly as a substitute for some of what we might have to build. So I'm going to continue to work with the school system to make sure we can identify other opportunities. If we can marry it with the Kid Museum, all the better. We're going to work on our workforce development. We've had a meeting, some of us. We've talked about a path going forward. There's legislation being developed to give us more flexibility on workforce. I share the concern that everybody else shared, that we weren't training the people we wanted to train, that there was a big hole in who we served, and it didn't seem to be getting any better. So we're going to be proposing legislation that gets us where we think we need to be, and that view is shared by many, many people who were part of that process. And I think we'll all be happy when we get there, and I think it'll take about 6 months or so to do a transition, but hopefully within 6 months to a year, we'll be in a place that we all feel more comfortable being in. And I think that's a good example of partnership. I can't do this alone. This is something where a lot of you have very strong feelings, and including our partners who aren't part of the government had pretty strong feelings. And we have the opportunity to work with a lot of people who have a feeling that we can do this better. And I'm committed to making sure we do this better. And I know that we'll be partners in getting there. We have to encourage entrepreneurship. I mean, I think about all the empty space that we're staring at, particularly not the empty white flint space, but the empty, office spaces and shopping center spaces that used to be filled. And there's been, real loss of entrepreneurialism, and we've got to figure out how do you reinvigorate that. Part of it, I mean, this is the bad news, that every time a WeWorks opens up, or any of the other, new workspaces, those are folks who used to go into small office spaces and maybe have a secretary out front in a second room, but certainly had their own office there. And they're not doing that anymore. To the extent they don't need to park themselves in somebody else's building and pay rent for, their part of the building for an entire month, they're in these workspaces. And there's an awful lot of people in the workspaces. They're doing a lot of jobs. They're a vibrant part of the economy, but they're not necessarily generating demand for office space. So we need to figure out how we're going to do that. Part of that's attraction of businesses to the county. That, was the primary goal. We set up the Economic Development Corporation, was that, the frustration over the previous administration's approach where we weren't seeing any results in recruitment. And those of you who were on the council with me remember the conversations when we would ask, do you go to any of these trade shows? Have you been here or there? And the answer was no. We need, and that's not the record of the EDC, that was the record of pre-EDC. So we need to make sure we're doing what we can to start attracting people here. We need to, I think, to be better about helping people expand here when they have the opportunities to expand here. And so we need to know before they're ready to leave. And I think, the message I've got from talking to people in other jurisdictions is people spend a lot of time going around and talking to people, more than we probably have historically done. And so they get to know about things before they happen. And if you're talking to somebody before it happens, and they may suggest to you that they're thinking about something, you have the opportunity to shape that thinking. But when the person's already made a decision and you're in a please don't go mode, that's a lot harder place to be. And I think we have to be more proactive in how we have these conversations. We need to really make our incubators more than what they are. I went to all 3 incubators, and I had one really, really good experience in the high-tech bio incubator. That place was really interesting and exciting, and I wanted to play with the tools. There were just amazing equipment there, and the work these people were doing is absolutely astounding. The other 2 incubators pretty much function as inexpensive rental space. And we talked to people in both of the other 2 incubators about why they were there and what help they got. And they said if their success did not depend on the help they got, that if they hadn't had the confidence in what they were doing, they never would have made it. That they made it because they knew they could do it, and this provided an inexpensive place for them to do it in and get off the ground, but it wasn't because of the support and the work that was done to support them, which is a little bit different story than the bio and the high-tech incubator where there is support. So we need incubators that aren't just high-tech and bio, but we need them across the board. But we need to provide support, and make real incubators provide a range of support to people coming into the incubator so that people can take an idea and get support in marketing, get support in technical assistance or business assistance. There are a lot of people who have good ideas for a product, but they know nothing about business. And so if you don't know anything about business and try to open up a business, you may well fall flat on your face and let a perfectly good idea die because you didn't have the help you needed to turn that into something that would be successful. So I envision a more lively and a more engaged incubator environment where we're actually pushing things and helping people develop. I continue to be fascinated by OpenWorks in Baltimore. I encourage anybody who's got the time to take a visit up there. It's 34,000 square feet under roof of some of the most interesting things I've seen. And, you know, a room full of 3D printers that people use to come in and print products that they were going to put into local stores. A room full of sewing machines that were driven by a computer where somebody put a design into the computer and the sewing machine sewed patterns into the cloth and, you know, the clothes or whatever they were sewing, and then took those out to stores. I saw people making furniture, violins, and guitars, all using high-tech cutting tools and high-tech machinery there. And people were actually actively engaged, over 300 people. They had community nights, they had teenagers coming in, they had young people coming in and seeing what was being done. It was really impressive. We don't have anything like that, but there's no reason why we couldn't build something like that. And so, you know, I've seen what's possible. I think some of us other folks have seen what's possible, and we need to figure out how we make that happen here. I think the last thing I'd, you know, probably get to here is the addressing the image of the county. And one of the things that, going back to the campaign, you know, we would talk about Montgomery County's image, and some people would say, well, you know, got this horrible image, we're business unfriendly. And at some point, because, you know, we've all heard this, any of us who've been around for 4, 8, or 12 years, I think we've heard it for 4, 8, or 12 years and before that. And no one ever said, is it true? Or let's find out. And so when I got elected and I had talked to Sydney about this, it was like, let's find out what makes this so difficult. Let's find out what people find to be the impediments in the county. If we're the same as everybody else, that would be a good discovery. We could say, good news, folks, you know, it's just a rumor. But I got to say, when you hear the same thing over and over again, when you walk into a room of people who are just sitting at tables and they just start talking to you and they happen to be business people and they retell the same story over and over again, and the night later you're in a different place with a different group of people and they don't know the people you saw the night before and they tell you that same story again, at some point you got to think you've got a problem. And I kind of felt pretty strongly that we had a problem. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we could hear from the business community. There are a couple of different things that flow to this. One is the regulatory environment. Just what do we make people do to go through the hoops to open up a business? How long does it take? Do we make people do things that other people don't have to do? We need answers to those questions, and that's part of what we're doing is benchmarking ourselves against what we know other jurisdictions are doing. And I don't feel that Montgomery County is any safer or better than Fairfax or Howard. And if we're doing things that other people aren't doing, we probably don't need to be doing them. Another issue that comes up a lot is that if you're going into an older building in Montgomery County and you have to, in taking occupancy, rehab the space, people say that the requirements to rehab space in Montgomery County are different than what it is in other jurisdictions, that we require more than other jurisdictions do. And what that adds to is both time and money to the renovation. And a lot of people just say, I'm not doing this. I'll go someplace else. My friend went someplace else and opened the restaurant in 3 months. My friend here tried to open up a restaurant. It took him a year. And I actually know people who it took a year or more to open something that should not have taken a year or more to open. And so we need to benchmark our requirements and particularly look at what other jurisdictions grandfather and what we grandfather to make sure we're not making it overly difficult for someone to do a renovation. And time is money, so if a landlord, you know, says you can start renting now and you've got 2 months free rent to get the place ready, and a year later you're still, you know, dealing with pipes and heating systems, you're now you've paid 10 months of rent that 2 months is meaningless to you. So we've got to figure out how to get this right so we're not doing that. So we're going to work really hard to go further. I mean, Diane Schwartz-Jones did a lot of work to revise the processes in this county. I give them a lot of credit for what they did, but there's more to do. And we're going to dig into the more to do part of this. The other side of business friendliness is letting people do business with Montgomery County. Another thing we hear from people frequently is, I can't do business here. I can't get a contract here. And oftentimes I heard people respond by saying, well, you're just bitter because you didn't get a contract. Everybody can't get a contract. Well, it's hard to get contracts when contracts are bundled. It's hard to get contracts when the time and energy to read a 130 or 140 page document or longer is not what you can put into it, particularly if you can't even understand what you're being asked to do. And that's discouraging to people. Or when you're in a bid and you tie in a bid, and I've had people tell me of 2 incidences where they saw ties in bids that were decided by a coin flip between a Montgomery County company and a non-Montgomery County company. That never should have gone to a coin flip. And it sends the wrong message to our business community. So there's plenty of support for the idea that if you do business with local business, the money stays here. And so if we invest in our businesses and we give them opportunities to do business with the county, they pay local rent, we've got their property taxes, their income taxes, their personal property taxes. Sydney knows the taxes on the inventory that you carry on the day you have to count your inventory. So the money stays in the county. And if we deal with businesses in Virginia or Pennsylvania, the money leaves the county. And a lot of our business people talk about folks who get these benefits in Prince George's County, for example, and don't get them here. And I actually talked to people who said, I could have opened up in Montgomery County or Prince George's County. When I tried to do business in Prince George's County, I ran into local preferences. When I wanted to do business in Montgomery County, there was no preference to protect me. I'm going to Prince George's County, or at least if I want to do business there, there's a preference for me there. And so we have legislation that's in legal now that will give preference points and preference for the price of a bid to local contractors, so local businesses, so they have a better chance of succeeding in Montgomery County. We are looking at the bidding process and the bundling process, so we make sure we're not narrowing the number of people who are eligible to bid on contracts. So it's the same 5 people who have the contract for a certain part of the IT department for 5 years until it's opened up again and then closed to 5 people for the next 5 years. So we're looking at a more robust bidding and procurement process that'll open it up to everyone. So Sidney's seen this himself. We actually have new contracting stuff. You get a 1-page summary of what's in the contract, and the contracts now have shrunk to a readable size and understandable size. And so that and the preference legislation will be the first 2 pieces of legislation that come out of the listening. And what we told people was that we will change things we can change without the need for either a new regulation or a new law. We'll change them as quickly as we can. Legal stuff, if I can't wave a wand and say this will be different, we'll send it over to the council. We'll continue to evaluate everything through the report, and at the end of that, we'll have different processes. So, in short, we're at the process now of resetting ourselves. I think, frankly, the biggest battle to win is the image battle. It hurts when somebody tells their friend to go someplace else. It makes it hard to bring somebody here. And so part of the reason we put so much emphasis on dealing on the small business side of this is if people feel they can do business here, they will tell their friends to come here. We've talked to people who've got friends who've got business in Virginia who would like to come back here if they felt this was a friendlier place because they actually live here. They don't like driving over the bridge. They went there because they thought that was a better place to do business. I want to bring those people back, and if they start coming back, then our story starts to change. And so that's sort of an overview of where we are right now. Thank you for indulging me as I went through that.
Thank you so much. Really do appreciate this overview. I also would be remiss if I did not thank the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, who is here, as well as partners from the chambers. I see a lot of people, Ms. Stevenson, as well as the regional services directors, because this is going to be an effort that is going to require everybody. And I think it's clear that this is, a county council that is absolutely engaged in a lot of activity around this issue, because we don't have the luxury of time. And so this is why this conversation is super important. I do want to also, again, point to the fact that in our packet, Mr. Smith did create a chart, and I had requested this because I think that it's going to be really critical for us to, number one, understand where all the different functions lie, and then be able to best address where we want to go. So one thing that I will just formally ask, I know we had asked if there was a possibility of responding to this chart and updating it, but we weren't able to get that in time. So if you do have that, Mr. Fletcher, that would be great. I know that you had responded to Mr. Smith on June 20th that you had not been able to provide the updated economic development chart. But that is something that is also very useful, because part of what we need to do is understand all the different pieces. You alluded to the fact that we have a lot of assets, and we do. But part of changing that image is how dynamic are we in terms of leveraging those assets, and how do we not only have rhetoric and framing, but also how are we enhancing what we have right now, and how are we leveraging everything. So that would be something I think of great use. And then the memo that we had also sent, I think it was June 10th, also just had a few questions that would be great to get some written responses, and a lot of it is just in terms of timing and target. So that the work that we're doing here, obviously we want to make sure that we are coordinating whatever we need to coordinate. And for example, the workforce development legislation, it's already been introduced, and we're moving very quickly, because again, it is very true that part of it, my husband's a businessman, and he always says, I don't want to waste anybody's time, because time is money. And it is very true. We don't have the luxury of just a lot of conversation. We need to move very quickly. I will acknowledge that, we have neighboring counties who had to struggle for a very long time with this image thing. And they have managed to be very deliberative in changing that image. And we're not at that point, obviously, but there is no doubt that we need to get really aggressive about truly changing that image that you were referring to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. I'm going to do a time check. I think that I want to wrap up at noon, because we have quite a bit of things left this afternoon. But really do want to thank you, Mark, for your presentation. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Council President Navarro. I appreciate your convening this discussion, and thank you to the County Executive for coming over to sit with us today and be in dialogue. Since we don't have a ton of time, I'll just try to be, make one, ask for one response. Just as preface, I share those concerns about the state of the county's economy, and as you, I know, will agree, in the past, it was sort of like we were rowing downstream as far as the economy was going. We didn't have to do too much. The investment came, the companies came, the jobs grew, the federal government grew. But today, it feels like we're rowing upstream. It's not easy the way it used to be, and we've got to really be aggressive and competitive, and we have to take initiative, and we have to develop a new mindset. And our private sector economy is really where we're lagging. The FDA is actually continuing to grow, and NIH hasn't really shrunk, so the public sector seems to be holding its own, if not growing, but the private sector is where we are really anemic and need to see a lot more happening if we're going to be able to support the quality of life that we have. I know you agree with that. I guess I just wanted to generally ask, how can we move from the idea level to the action level? I think that's the critical issue here. So can you please just talk about operationalizing some of the ideas that you've shared with us, what the next 3 to 6 months, will look like. How do we move forward and put initiatives in place and make changes?
So I don't want to be coy. That's not my nature. We are dealing with a couple of potential projects that I can't lay out on the table because the potential partners aren't married yet and don't necessarily want people to know what they're talking about. But I'll just tell you in a broader sense, when Amazon didn't happen, we did a lot of soul searching. Everybody scratched their head and wondered why. Even if you weren't excited about it, you wanted to know you were in the top 20, but you didn't make it to the end, what was missing. And that's when I started a series of conversations with people about what did Virginia offer, some of the things they offered that we couldn't match. And I realized they were pretty much dead right. The state stepped up in a mega way on the education front. We're watching the other universities in Virginia. I think George Mason's talking about a medical center. We're still quibbling.
Prince William County, George Mason's expanding medical.
And we're already, we've been talking about, we don't even have a major university here. You remember life sciences was supposed to be, Hopkins was supposed to do this life sciences thing. Well, they never put anything there. And if you look at the significance, and if you look at Hopkins' long-term budget, they have no long-term plans for a major investment there. So we are looking at what we can do to attract a major educational institution, one or more. People have identified for us in the business community this concern about IT. There is a talent issue in Montgomery County, and it is no offense to any of our existing institutions, but there's levels of talent that are developed beyond what you normally get at the college level right now. And other people are addressing it. I expected the state to do a better job, the state not so much so far. So we're looking at what we could land here or what we could do here that would beef up our talent pool. I mean, people are really worried about the impact of Amazon over in Virginia on talent in all the surrounding jurisdictions. They're going to start recruiting almost instantly, if they're not. In fact, they're doing it already. When we were at the University of Maryland talking with them and Ken Ullman, the university lost, I think it was 4 major faculty members to Amazon, like that. And what was the state's response? They're opening up an 8,000 square foot facility in Virginia next to Amazon. I would have thought the state's response would have been, what do we need to do in the state of Maryland, in Montgomery County or PG County, in order to provide the kind of talent and skills that obviously that world is looking for. We're waiting to see that response. Yeah. We're going to encourage them to make that response. So we've been in discussions. We've been meeting with Ken Ullman, that I can say. I'm interested in his perspective on things. He's very close to the university, but also generally interested in economic development and economic development strategies. There have been a number of developers who've come to us with really fascinating ideas that are actually doable. And U.S. Pharmacopoeia made a suggestion for something that if we were to acquire it would be, I asked the question of what asset, what could Montgomery County bring here that would be of a major use to them. And they mentioned a particular kind of university program that doesn't exist here, but they thought there would be people really hungry to bring it here where there an opportunity. So we are actually working on those things, and I wish you could just tell people you had to do a shotgun wedding, but you can't do that. But I hope people that some of these discussions bear fruition, but I've been very happy that these discussions have actually been ongoing, that it wasn't just an introduction and then that's nice meeting you, but it's actually been an ongoing discussion. I happen to think that White Flint sits in a unique position in Montgomery County because you've got NIH to the south and you've got Science City to the north, and oh, by the way, you're sitting on the red line. And you got a major center in Bethesda sitting to the south, so if you want to go out to dinner and find entertainment or whatever, you've got a place down there. And you've got this big empty expanse of property, and you've got very low-rise stuff there. And so there is an opportunity to redevelop White Flint in a way, I think, that's different than we had previously conceived it. And I've seen a site plan with lots of square footage, but a different layout than's been traditional.
Thank you. We had great conversations about the tech talent pipeline. I've talked to Jerome about that. There may be some really good opportunities for us to work together in that area, as you said, to provide the workforce needs for that tech economy that we need to grow here.
All right, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and I also will limit my many questions to just the top 1.5 or so here. I couldn't agree with you more on the story. That the story of Montgomery County and how we've talked about this, how we present where we are on certain indicators has not been told, and there certainly are areas of improvement. I know that's part of the reason you did the 4 business tour. A specific example, then a question. You know, in our packet for today, the office vacancy, which we always hear about, and you mentioned it in your remarks, we're at 11.9% office vacancy. Fairfax is at 15.8%, and Arlington's at 17.4%. So we have a lower vacancy rate than, and I bet you most people would say ours would be much higher. It's just one example. We don't, our corporate tax rate is lower than Virginia, all right? People don't know that. And so I think there's a story. You mentioned the work that DPS has done on shortening windows of time. Could we do better? Of course. There's a packaging of these things that create a story that we need to tell better, and we all need to be singing from the same choir sheet. Yeah. And so my question is, this benchmarking and packaging of what we're doing well, but the benchmarking of what we could be doing better, and then action on that as far as a report or some sort of that we can work together on. What's the timeline on that? Because I think that's critical. There's a lot of tactical things you've discussed, but the story, I really would like to see a plan of action for that.
So the CAO is working with our tech people to actually develop the what do you call them, dashboards. Yeah. I'm trying to be current in my terminology, and starting to benchmark these things. So I think it's really important. I mean, the thing I want to do is highlight the differences in the cost of developing in Montgomery County versus Fairfax County, because, you know, I said this before, I'll say it again since maybe people are listening. Our tax rate's under $1 here. The base tax rate in Fairfax County is $1.12, I think. No, $1.15, sorry. Then every square inch of commercial property in Fairfax County pays a 12.5 cent or 12 cent tax for transportation only. That the developers in the business community went to the Virginia Republican legislature to get authority to oppose on the 3 northern Virginia counties. Why? Because, like us, they could not see a way how they're ever going to build the transportation that they needed. And so the development community, being relatively farsighted, said it'd be better to pay a tax to fund the infrastructure, which would then allow us to grow and attract people, rather than to continue to say, we don't have the infrastructure, we're stuck, we can't go anywhere. So now they're up to $1.27.5. You go to Tyson's Corner, add 22.5 cents for the privilege of developing in Tyson's Corner, and another 15 cents for the second special taxing difference. So it's 37 and $1.27. So you're looking at what, $1.65? Mm-hmm. Montgomery County's tax is nothing like that. Nothing like that. And then people will say, oh, but Montgomery County's got the energy tax. So my answer to people is, I'll tell you, I'll have to make a trade with you. Virginia doesn't. Virginia has a gross receipts tax, 3% on all businesses. So would you rather pay the energy tax or the gross receipts tax? They raise $160 million off the gross receipts tax, which only applies to businesses. We raise $180 million off the energy tax, which is businesses, government facilities, schools, hospitals, homes, and everything. So which of those two taxes is more onerous for the business community? You can figure it out. We need to tell that story. Right. And so that's part of what we're going to do, as well as the educational pieces and all that other stuff. We will get that out there.
In the point 5, I appreciate that you mentioned early childhood care and education as a key economic driver. I couldn't agree with you more. We've seen that in D.C. since they passed their 2-year plan in 2009. The maternal working rate alone went up 10% and added money to their economy. And so we have to talk about that in those terms, as well as the quality of life. And then on our small businesses, we need to make sure that we're supporting them, whether it be office space, and you could comment on this, and being able to afford rent, but also making sure we ease the burden on them economically, whether it be child care, educational debt. So continue that. We need to have a whole package on how we ease the squeeze on those folks, to use my Councilmember Friedson's term.
I'll give you an idea to ponder. I don't have any legislation, so don't anybody panic. But look, when you take an area of relatively low density and you give them massive upzoning, and their property values pretty much go through the ceiling, and on the ground floor used to be all these local small businesses, and after they're gone and the new building goes up, it's T-Mobile and every major national chain or international chain in the world, and the small guys are gone because they can't afford the rent. There are jurisdictions, I dare say, that have something equivalent to MPDUs, but they have MPDUs for retail. I wouldn't say require MPDUs over the entire floor area, but I think it would not be a bad idea to have some retail MPDUs where rents are set at a level that are affordable to small businesses, because short of the government writing a check for what will be enormous dollar per square foot differences, I look at that as part of the give back for government giving you the zoning to make your property as valuable as it becomes. So nobody panic, but just think about it. I know it's a little outside of our frame normally, but other people are doing this, and the problem you're talking about is real.
All right, we have 10 minutes, and we have a lot of lights, so I think that council members may have to just either shorten it, because I'm going to stop at 12, and if there are outstanding questions, I'm sure that it can be sent to you,
Yeah.
Mr. Fletcher, for answers. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. I understand I'm going to be right under target here. So, but I just wanted to publicly say, and you certainly have touched on it, Mark, that really the small business tours, the 4 business tours, really have been beyond everything else interesting. And we've heard directly from people exactly what they need, and some people wouldn't talk in public. We're getting more and more of that information as well. But we do not tell our story well. We do not market ourselves well. And to your point about the statistics, and some people aren't going to read these statistics, they're going to say, but I heard. So we have to find out a way to say, yeah, but you should have heard this one as well, to get us back on track. Small businesses, and we have a lot of good things that we're doing in the county. We do. Not everything is perfect. I see Judy Stevenson and Tina Benjamin and other people in the room. But Jerome, the other night, we were at a Montgomery County Small Business Association's 1-year anniversary. It was a lot of fun. Did a great job speaking, as did Ash Shetty, as did Grace Steno. And it truly showed that there's people in Montgomery County, and this was a small business group, that realize that we are doing a lot of good things, but there's plenty of people who are not in that room that didn't realize it. So we've got to market ourselves better. We have to make certain that we remind people that a small business, especially, we need big business too. I mean, we're not knocking any business here, but that the small businesses especially, not only is it a dream for someone to open up their own business and to get there, but they have to be able to figure out how to afford it, and they have to be able to figure out how we can make certain that they stay in business. The only way they can do that is to have customers. I'm going to stop, Madam President, but I can tell you, I think by working together, we can get there.
Absolutely. Councilmember Rice.
I'm going to try and be quick. I just want to correct a few things. And Mr. County Executive, you and I differ from time to time, and this is one where I firmly disagree with you. I think we are better than Fairfax. And you said you didn't think necessarily we're better than Fairfax or safer than Fairfax. I think we are a better county than Fairfax, and I think it's important for us to say that. I think we are one of the best counties to live, work, and play in this Washington metropolitan region. And as county executive, I would hope that you continue to make sure that that message is heard. It speaks to business. It speaks to individuals in the community. It speaks to people who are thinking about coming to live here. And so I just want to make sure that that's there. You talked about universities and saying that you wanted to attract an institute of higher education. Well, we've got universities at Shady Grove that represents 9 universities, over 80 degree programs that's right here. What I think we do need to do is work with USG to continue to grow that organization and its partnership with Montgomery College to make sure that we're focusing on career technology jobs. These are things I know you believe in, but it's important for you to say that and that message to be heard to the public so they understand where we're going and where we're headed. Messaging is incredibly important from our county executive, and so I hope that you continue as you're talking and having these tours and meeting with businesses and communities that you say this. And lastly, when it comes to our agricultural reserve that represents 1/3 of our land mass, I didn't hear that as a part of your conversation. I know you care about it. I know you work on those things, but again, it needs to be out there and talked about. If we are to truly talk about economic development in our community, it involves our agricultural reserve, the great work that you're doing when it comes to Poolsville and the great crushing facility, but there's so much more that we can do to make sure that we're reinforcing that part of our county. And so again, these are just statements about things that I know you care about. I just want you to say them because it's important. Words matter. Thank you, Madam President.
So I just want to clarify 2 things. My reference to better had to do with the notion that somehow we've made people safer by regulations than they are in other places. I was talking about the regulatory environment. I don't, things don't catch fire anymore in Fairfax County than they catch fire here. I wasn't talking about the place being better. I was talking about whether we've done anything that made us safer. And I think we'd probably all agree we're all pretty safe around here. And my emphasis on the university is the higher education, the postgraduate component of it, the research facility that didn't come with Hopkins, which, we're number 4 in the bio world. We're the only one not anchored by a major research facility. And I wonder what would happen if we could land a major research facility here. We'd probably go beyond number 4. We would probably be looking at number 1 or number 2. Because we've got all the right things. Having that here would be a major attractant for people. And so I didn't mean to diminish your sense of USG or Montgomery College, but I think we are looking for, call it the finishing end of this thing.
Cool. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Madam President. Mark, thanks for being here. I give you a lot of credit for being here in person. This is something I think we really could have used, annually at least during the last term. Okay, speed round. You talked about a lot of different approaches. What are your top 3 priorities in this area, and what are the metrics you're going to use to measure success?
I can't do a top 3 game. There is so much that has to happen. So early childhood absolutely is a top thing, but in and of itself, if it's not finished by what I do at the other end of school, for example, it's for naught. If I don't deal with transportation, or if I deal with transportation's great, but if I don't figure out a strategy to actually bring people here, I'll be transporting them to spaces that we all want to have filled. So the question is, so what do you do to bring people here? So I actually believe government can do more than 3 things. It makes it harder. It'd be nice if I just said, I got 1 or 2 objectives, I'm going to do them, look how I am. But I think I look at what we've inherited and the problems we're dealing with. We got to be all in a lot of different ways. We just can't say, we're going to focus on these 3. So I'm focused on a lot, and it just comes with the territory.
How will you measure success?
We'll start having metrics. Will be, the things you look for would be creation of new businesses. What happens to employment? What happens to wage levels? I'd be interested in how many kids are, how many students can we put through these special programs in high school? How deeply can we reach into early childhood so that we're not, serving 3,000 people out of 30,000, but can we get to 10, 15, 20,000 people? Those are the things that I'd measure, and I would invite you, all of you, to think of what are the things we want to be. I don't doubt if my ideas are different than most of your ideas in that sense. So I'd encourage everybody to be a part of constructing what are the things you think we ought to be trying to hit on.
How much, I realize you're doing a lot of, we're still engaged in setting up the government and restructuring it in ways that you favor. What % of your time do you feel like you're spending on economic development now, and how will that change in the next year or so?
So I have spent an enormous amount of my time in the business world. That's, I would say, for a while, that's almost all I did. I mean, I'd say briefly during the budget, all I got to do was to figure out how to cut something in order to make it fit inside the budget. I got to say it was the most soulless part of the job I ever had. It was just to look at numbers and know that starting with what was brought over, I had to make them fit the resource match. But having gotten past that, it's actually been a focus, you know, real heavily on how do we, what do people want, what do they need, and what makes us interesting, and how can I make myself interesting as the county.
Thanks. Last term, I sponsored, and I know you supported a tax credit for the Burtonsville area for an enterprise zone there. It now has the lowest startup costs of any area in Montgomery County for a new business. We have a number of tax credits like that, but they don't work if people don't know about them. Who in your government is responsible for educating our business owners, entrepreneurs about our tax credits?
I guess I'm going to lay it on Jerome to some extent, but also I think it's our whole staff. I mean, Tina works actively in the business community, and Judy Stevenson is working with the small business folks. So there's a group of people who have contacts at different levels.
Okay. And last question, Madam President. I'm really optimistic about the initiative to use the regional service directors to work with small businesses in their areas. Giroux did a great job when the Safeway left at Briggs Cheney, replacing that with a very successful grocery store now. I've always thought of them as sort of an untapped resource or an unsupported resource. Besides the great work Judy's doing and the work that they'll probably do in conjunction with Judy, what sort of services will they be able to provide struggling retail tenants and restaurants to make their businesses more successful?
Do you want to talk about the resource centers?
Yeah. So, good morning, Councilman. So, with Judy and the team, the Business Solutions Group being located out in the field now, you know, what they are providing to make those businesses successful are a couple things. One, they are providing direct attention, whether it's in person, we're talking about technical assistance, as in addition to workshops and trainings. But also, I think more to the point of what you're trying to get at is we as a county have several programs that we offer in the form of grants, and we partner with people with loans to make sure that they have access to capital, which is by far the most important thing to a business that is in need. So what we are doing, and you will see this in a plan that's coming to you later this week, is that we are exploring all the options to make sure that we can actually make sure that we increase access to capital, access to information, and access to procurement.
I know we're out of time. I'd love to work with you on the specifics of that. It's been my experience that restaurants that I think are, serve good food, and yet they don't have a good business plan, a good marketing plan in a White Oak, in a Burtonsville, struggle, and then when they get in touch with me, it's often too late by the time they find out about some of the programs we have available, and I want to figure out how to market our services in a more effective way.
It's a part of what you said earlier, as far as reaching out to them, we need to make sure that we are proactive in reaching out to them before they realize they're at the point where they need the help and it's far too late. And also what we need to do is, I'm going to work with our PIO, who is very big on branding, so that we can communicate the resources and the assets that we have so people are aware. If people don't know about them, they certainly will not use them.
Right. Struggling business owners usually think they need to work harder rather than carve out some of their time to find out what programs we might have to help.
Yes, sir.
So that's why to add that, one of the things that I'd like to get back to is when I first started, even before I was a county councilman, when I was in Tacoma Park, and we were working with Long Branch and some of the economic development stuff there, and then in Wheaton, and then early on in Burtonsville. The regional services centers had these economic development people who were working on projects, and we lost that. I mean, regional service centers actually used to have real staff, and that got lost.
But I would submit to you that I think that this is a great opportunity to rethink how we do that, because even though they had them before, a lot of the issues in those areas were issues that were persistent. So I'm not sure that that was the best model. And I think that now we have an opportunity to, respond to the needs on the ground. I will also add that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, because the small business assistance program that we are modeling in Wheaton, et cetera, has components that can be utilized in those other areas. So I think we already have so much in place. Again, it's a matter of doing kind of a census all of these issues and being, absolutely proactive. You have a team with the regional services directors that I think is top notch. And the most important piece is that they know their communities. They know what is needed. They need to be empowered with not only the information, but the decision-making ability to then offer that before it becomes, a challenge. So I'm excited about this possibility of rethinking, this model. And I wouldn't necessarily think about how it was in the past because things have changed, dramatically. So it's a really awesome time to do it absolutely in a much different way. Anyway, we do have 3 more council members here. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. And that was a segue to which my brief question will be asked. It's about the reorganization that's occurring. So we're all new in these roles, some of us, you, me. Montgomery County Department of Economic Development Corporation will be undergoing new leadership changes. Where are you within the organizational leadership changes within county government to help give assurances to those who are watching that we are fully staffed and ready to help as needed?
So we have been looking at how we reorganize the current structure of our people particularly, because they're in multiple different departments. And my goal is to have all of that aligned in a single place, so that people are all talking the same language, that there's a very close coordination between those assets, and that's what we're going to turn our attention to, as well as the conundrum of the economic development director and this continuing struggle between can I find, and I will say I have taken some time trying to do this because I absolutely want the right person. I could find people who would pass, but I really think this is such an important position that I want to get it right the first time. I want to make sure that that person is going to be able to lead effectively, but I also feel pretty comfortable because I've had time to work with Tina and Judy, and I think of the world of Jerome, that we've got the ability, we know kind of what we want to do. We've got the ability to direct it. We've actually been able to go out and do things. I think putting the director in there will top it off, but I feel like putting them together and consolidating them, working on the plan is is well within our reach.
And I appreciate the thoughtfulness that you're taking into account through the process, but we're 7 months in.
Yeah.
Is there any timeline as to when some of this restructuring will occur?
I think the movement of people will happen hopefully relatively soon because they're there. I mean, it's not like we're not meeting with them. But I want to make sure, somebody's not sitting in the library reporting to a library director and somebody's sitting in finance and someone's sitting someplace else. I want them all sitting, at least reporting to the same people and coordinating. So we're meeting with them, effectively doing that. But structurally, we're going to go ahead and make that second level of changes.
I look forward to seeing some of those appointments or statutory changes if it requires our approval for reorganizing government. And last point, going back to the importance of communication and messaging. We can message the heck out of how great Montgomery County is, but it's never going to be the anecdotal stories that our business people tell each other. And so all the data in the world is not going to help. We need people going through this process and walking away feeling good about it.
Yep. That's why we're doing the listening tours, so we can fix the things, so the next time somebody goes through and they say, this wasn't, a problem. This actually worked. Because then that person goes out and tells somebody. So I believe me, if I could fix this with just publicity, that'd be great, but I know that doesn't mean anything to anybody, because the first person that says, I tried to open something there and it did not work, that kills any story you're trying to tell.
Great. Thank you.
Councilmember Bernos.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate this discussion. As we've all discussed, this has to be our priority right now, because this will be the key to all of the other challenges that we have before us today. And I appreciated your comments, Mr. Elrich. I didn't disagree with anything you said. I think you said over 9 times we have to figure out, and you're right, we do have to figure out. And I appreciate you're still in the development of your team. We have a couple of key positions still outstanding, permanent services being one of them. Are you looking for, as you fill out some of your department head positions, people with an economic development experience, background, or context. The appointment of Ash Shetty, I think, is a great example of having somebody with private sector experience come through to provide a deep lens. If you could just elaborate quickly on what you're looking for, particularly with that position.
So we're looking with somebody who has economic development experience. My appointments in general, you notice there's been some diversity as what their backgrounds are. I'm looking at talent. I'm not looking at somebody who just says I worked for the government. There are obviously some people we moved up from within the ranks, but there are people we've gone outside and they've moved from similar positions. There have been people like Ash, whose experience was private sector, not government. What I'm interested in is when I talk to somebody, are they going to tell me that their job is to solve the problem, or are they going to start telling me what the limitations of what they can do are? I'm a big believer that any problem we have, somebody else has addressed and figured out. And that I want someone who's creative and is willing to look around at what other people do and has some experience to indicate that they're that kind of problem solver. I think we have problems. I want people who are problem solvers. I don't want people who think this is a job you can take and coast in. I want to bring in people who look at this and say, this is challenging. There are some issues you need to address, and I want to be part of that. So that's a quality that's really important to me. And I'm not looking for yes people. And if you know anything about my staff over the years and what I've told the staff over there, I'm not looking for people to just say yes, whatever you want, sir. I've told people they can tell me they disagree with me. People can have open conversations with me about things. All of us know what we know at any given moment based on what we've been exposed to. And when people have new ideas or different ideas, it actually pays to listen to them. So that's why I said in the beginning, I'm doing a lot of listening because I know what I know, but I also know I don't know everything. And I'm interested in a kind of robust conversation with people that I think indicates they're willing to take on the challenges that this county presents.
I appreciate that. And given this is such a high priority, I think it's important that every department in your administration feel like they have a role to play, from health and human services to recreation to libraries, because there must be a holistic approach to this, and communicating that clearly with the defined plan to all of your agencies and team will be important. And I look forward to working with you on this important issue moving forward.
So
Thanks.
if you notice, our ACAOs don't report to particular departments. Our ACOs are issue focused, recognizing what you said, that the issues are multidisciplinary. And so our ACOs overlap departments.
Councilmember Friedson.
I'm starting a timer.
So this is how it normally works, where nobody else gets a timer. They talk for a long time, and then it turns to me, and it's, oh, Friedson again. Loves to talk, loves the microphone, loves to hear himself talk. First of all, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. This is obviously one of the most important discussions that we could possibly have. We can't deal with anything in the county without dealing with economic development if we want to keep up our high quality of life, the level of services that our residents have come to expect and deserve, and if we want to keep up with the growing needs, which we know are getting more and more challenging as time goes on. We absolutely have to grow a private sector economy, and so this conversation couldn't be more important, and I'm glad that we're having it. I'm glad that you're here today. I appreciate a couple of things that you mentioned. I didn't have a ton of time to review beforehand, but your focus on BRT, your continued leadership on that issue. I think BRT in general is a huge opportunity for economic development and for growing the communities that we want and where businesses and residents want to be. Obviously, 355 for me is particularly important. I think it is a key part of the connective tissue that connects some of the main assets that we have in the county, and so I look forward to working together with you on that. I appreciate you mentioning the co-location of the Kid Museum, and share your interest in finding a long-term home, and see that as a real key opportunity for workforce development, economic development, and education, and the placemaking that you mentioned. And I'm interested to learn more and look forward to hearing specifically the proposal that was mentioned in the memo about the local locally based business incentive program. I think that that's something that I'd be, particularly interested in and look forward to working with you on. A couple concerns. One, I share your view that government has to walk and chew gum at the same time and that there are a lot of challenges, but I don't think that it's possible to focus on everything. By prioritizing everything, you're prioritizing nothing, and I think that it's important, while we may be working on and dealing with and dabbling in a wide range of things, I do think that there has to be some triage and there has to be some prioritization. I think that not only is it important for you and for the leadership of the government, I think it's important for the message that we send to the public. I think that it's important for our businesses to know what we're focusing on, and I think that that will help to spur some confidence. I think that will help to spur some certainty if there is a 1, 2, 3 list of things that we have. So I appreciate the idea of walking and chewing gum. I understand that government has lots of responsibilities and we can't walk away from any of those responsibilities, but I do think that the definition of focus is picking certain things and prioritizing them above others. And I do have a few specific questions. I will also commend you, and I appreciate you and Councilmember Katz on the For Business initiative that you have. I do share, though, some of the concerns that Councilmember Rice raised about the language that we use. I think having a goal that has been repeated of we just don't want to be worse than anywhere else, I think is not the type of message that we ought to be sending. I mean, I appreciate where that is coming from, and I appreciate your authenticity and your candor, but I think it is important that we want to be the best place to do business. We want to be better than other places. We want to attract people, and by selling that we're no worse than anywhere else, it's not, to me, the sales pitch and the type of messaging that we want to have as a county and as county leaders. But specifically, a few questions. One, the small business strategic plan was mentioned in the memo that we got. Do we have a timing on when we're going to receive that? It shows as an accomplishment that it's been drafted, but I don't know that I have seen it. I don't know if some of my colleagues have.
You have not. You will receive it this week. We're finalizing the edits that we got from our outside stakeholders. We distributed it internally, and then we distributed it to a few of our stakeholders to make it more robust and more comprehensive. You will get it this week, and then once you get it, then we would appreciate your feedback on it. It is not finalized, and it is definitely looking for your input before we get to the end point of it.
Great. Well, I look forward to that, and perhaps we can have a Fed work session to talk through it and maybe have more of a dialogue than we're able to have here on that. How about the incubators? That was mentioned here. Do we have a timing on the proposal for the incubators? And there was also mention about a consultant in conjunction with the EDC.
Correct. So the incubator consultant effort is being finalized now with the scope of work to include the entrepreneurial support that is listed on the function chart, and that is an area that we want to make sure that we don't neglect. So we're going to combine those two and find a consultant, and then you should see something from that. I would say once we procure the consultant somewhere in the next 90 days or so.
And is that going to be funded out of the money that we appropriated for the consultant, or is that going to be funded out of the EDC? It was a little confusing as the way that it was presented.
I think it's going to be a combination of it, but it's not going to be from the funding that, I think you're referring to the NDA $200,000 that was left in the account?
Yes.
No. There was another funding source that we had identified.
Okay, I'd like to follow up with that because the intention was that that money was left in to deal with this effort, and so
Okay.
I'd be interested to learn more about that. And I will close my final. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to note that during the budget, $142,000 was left in the incubator NDA based on debt service savings for the purpose of the incubator study. So I let the executive staff and MCD staff work with that, but there's still $142,000 separate from the $200,000 that you're speaking about in the incubator NDA for this study.
Right, but the 142 will be used for this. Is that
Correct. The 142
okay,
will be, but not the 200 that
Thank
you
you
left. Right.
Thank you for clarifying that. Final question, I promise, because I know I'm standing between everybody and lunch. What is, speaking of the EDC, I know there's been a lot of conversation of figuring out roles and responsibilities and try to clarify, and County Executive and I appreciate had a brief conversation about some thoughts on this, but has that been thought through and finalized? Do you have a plan for that, or do we have a timeline of when we might learn that plan?
Yeah, so, the EDC is an important partner of ours, and as we have been having meetings with them to try to figure out how to best align the executive's vision and their actual workforce efforts, what we are looking for them right now is a focus on marketing, attraction, retention, and expansion of current businesses. The other things that they do that also affect our economic success are very important as well, whether they're on the entrepreneurial, innovative side, et cetera. And what we are doing is trying to make sure that we have a transition or at least a dialogue of who's doing what to make sure that those roles are not dropped while we ensure that their focus remains on attraction of the very big and large companies.
I appreciate that. And I'll just close with a request, not a question, you don't need to go into it, but if you could follow up with this as quickly as possible on what the metrics are that Councilmember Hucker asked about and that are noted that you're working on, the FY20 metrics. FY20 starts in a week, and it would be helpful, I think, for my colleagues and me to have those specific metrics of how we are going to determine what success is and whether or not we've met it or we've come short of it or we've surpassed it based on those metrics.
And we are working on those as part of what we are finalizing for the EDC board is the metrics that the county wants to look at the organization for fiscal year 20. So we're almost there with that.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to say that occasionally I like to use humor, and I find that comment I make is usually a nice icebreaker for people who you tell them that you're going to make this the greatest place in the world, and people just roll their eyes at you. The truth is, there's somewhere in between that you're basically what you're trying to do is to let them know, look, we're really going to deal with this seriously. No one expects regulations to disappear. I just don't want to be, the worst place. And that's the image we're trying to change. So it's, different styles about communicating sometimes with people.
Thank you. I want to thank my colleagues as well as you, County Executive, and Mr. Fletcher, everybody who's here today. This is unique because I don't think that, as it was mentioned, that we had done this before as a matter of practice, but I think it's very critical because oftentimes there's confusion about who owns the strategy for economic development, and the answer is that we all need to own it. And we need to understand what it is that you're pursuing, what are your priorities, and then we need to figure out how we are here assisting, but also finding innovative ways and really pursuing this very important goal, because we are all out there on a daily basis working with our communities as you are, and it needs to be a unified voice at the end of the day if we're going to get somewhere. So I really do appreciate the time that everybody took, and we look forward to also those updates that are really useful. And thank you, Mr. Smith, for all your help getting us here. So with that, we're adjourned until 1:30. Thank you.